As a child, did you learn about angels? And what did you learn about angels? How did you relate to them then? And how do you relate to them now? Today's guest, Arianna Messplay, is an angelic healer, channel, and intuitive counselor, here to share the many ways we can connect with angels, our higher self, and our families too. This episode will speak directly to your heart, so let's dive in. Welcome to Mystical Sisterhood, Arianna. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I'm so grateful to be here and to share this sacred space with you.
Oh, I'm so excited to sit down and talk about angels, our higher self, and connection to our loved ones in our lives. And I want to first say, by way of how we were introduced, we met in Permission to Thrive, Susie Lula's group that ran over 3.5 years ago when we came together. And I think that was about a 9-month container with 12 or 13 women from across the country. And it was a beautiful, intimate space where I think we all showed up. And then through those 9 months, the beauty of that was we were able to be with ourselves, test the waters, and how safe it felt to us, and really have this elongated period of time to get to know one another and I think each other's souls. And it was a beautiful time. And I want to say that you and I left that group knowing each other, going through other classes together, but maybe not converging and collaborating yet. And Nani Langenstein was our girl. Like we both had really close and connected relationships with Nani. And so she's really who brings us here today. With that, I just want to say welcome. And I'm so glad that we're sitting down to deepen our friendship and invite the listeners into our conversation today.
Yes, and it's such a great intro into how we are connected. And I got the chills when you mentioned Nani, and my heart started racing. And it's like, I know she's here with us,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
happy that we are connecting in the way that we're connecting.
Absolutely. So I was so excited just to have you come and talk about angels because I've had mediums and channelers on before. I should really say channelers because I always think of my friend Valerie, who's been on a couple times, but she channels Archangel, or I heard you say Archangel. Maybe it can be said both ways. Michael, and that was her primary angel that she's been channeling for all these years. And then other spirits have come through her as well. But I think your life has transformed greatly in terms of your work and working in the angel realms. But can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into doing this work?
Okay. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I got on this path in a long-winded, windy road that started with a full 180 turn because I was a lawyer,
Mm,
which actually feels like another lifetime. Like I don't even feel like a lawyer. So it is a totally a different lifetime, like I said. And
yeah.
then I had an immense spiritual awakening in my late 20s that pushed me into the 180 turn
Wow.
and was a huge wake up call. And the 180 turn was basically taking me back to myself. I was
Okay.
completely off path. And that started me down the road of nutrition, health coaching. And I knew there was something about coaching or health service. And I was just finding my way back to myself. And it did start through nutrition and taking care of myself, which then led me into motherhood.
Mhm.
Motherhood was one of the deep ways that I have found myself more than any other place. I was directed more into my intuitive gifts once I became a mother, and I was getting downloads and channeling in my quiet time. But I didn't know I was doing that.
Mhm.
It was just because I was basically stopped my world to be a mother and was intuitively connecting with my son that it was changing my life and kept taking me back to myself. And I was working a lot. Motherhood had me doing a lot of healing,
Mhm.
reparenting, and changing patterns. That took me down the path of a lot of healing work, therapy, coaching, you name it, I've done
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
And so then that led me into conscious parenting, and I was doing that conscious parenting coaching, but something was missing.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
even in my healing work, I was like, something is just missing, still missing for me. And it was the spiritual and intuitive arts piece that I was keeping stifled
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
practice. I wasn't exposing myself for the woo-woo person. It's not,
Right.
it is
Hmm.
not woo-woo, but to some people, the woo-woo, very spiritual, very connected and higher view that I had. I was really trying to contain it. And so I
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
struggling.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so over the last few years, that has been me opening up more to accepting that
Yeah.
I can't leave that out of my work.
I
So
love it.
that has
Yes.
been
Yeah. Yeah.
the way.
Well, it reminds me too of your path. I didn't realize when we looked into coaching, we both shared getting into health and wellness coaching first because that's what I thought that I was meant to do. And I had looked into programs for it in 2018 and I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the same time. And I thought, oh, how fortuitous is this? It's kismet, like that coming together, the health, and I'm having health challenges. And I studied it and it didn't feel deep enough. And then I studied radical remission, which was around spontaneous remissions and it didn't feel enough. And I'm hearing that in your journey too, that we will be led to what we're meant to be led to when we have those open minds and we'll know when it hasn't quite hit that sweet spot of what we're here to deliver. That's I'm really resonating with that part of your message right now.
Oh my God, you
Mm-hmm.
just said it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's your angels.
Mm,
It's your spirit guides, your angels, your team, your guidance team that keeps planting the seeds
yeah.
right here. And they're giving you what you can handle for that moment.
Yeah.
And then the next door, and then the next door, right? It was health coaching.
Yep.
Then, right, for you too, parent. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
wait, there's an element of my motherhood that needs to be part of this. And then more, and then the spiritual and the mystical came in. And the same with me. It was like the little bits you could handle to
Yeah.
keep
I like
opening
that.
the doors, to keep
Mhm.
you going down the path of the service you were meant to serve, is what you're so right.
Thank you for that, though. I've never heard it put that way. And I like to think of that. Okay, we're going to give these breadcrumbs, but if we might not want to, because I guess someone could handle it all coming at once, but the angels and guides know what our soul, the ways in which we learn. And so to honor that too. And I think when your episode is on, I think you're going to be episode 96. And next week 95 will air and that's when I was sharing with you like my stepping into the mystical like okay we were talking a bit about like showing these sides of ourselves and I was talking about in the solo episodes how they can be relegated to the whispers and the quiet or we really feel if we show this part of ourselves that maybe someone's going to whisper about us or say certain something and I know for myself I don't know about you I'm letting go of that I've much of it because I believe so much in its truth, its veracity, and the ability for all of these different resources and ways of connecting ultimately to ourselves. They're really needed. And that's why, like I say, thank you to you for heeding the call and keeping on leaning in, even when it's gotten uncomfortable.
You're
Yeah.
right. It is uncomfortable to expose ourselves and to really share. And like we were talking before we even got on, there pretty much most of the collective has what people refer to as the witch wound, or
Hmm.
some wounding around sharing ourselves or our vulnerability or our real truth and receiving criticism or ridicule or in past lives,
Yeah.
persecution and worse. So there is physical memory of that. So it is really scary. And
Hmm.
for me, it has been very challenging to step out, share myself
Yeah.
fully.
Hmm.
And as you were sharing, I want to honor the people around me who have held me
Hmm.
as I have struggled to heal those wounds and be like, no, I'm just going to stay in the corner. And Nani, our dear friend, was one of those who I think held both of us, and
Hmm.
Susie
Hmm.
Lula,
Hmm.
both of them holding us reminding us that shining our light was worth
Oh
stepping
yeah.
into fear.
Hmm.
And even I have to honor my bonus daughter too, who, because she's of that generation, you just do it and you put yourself out there. And she always reminds me to own it and just
Hmm. Hmm.
do it. And she does it in, her
Yes.
spunky way that is like,
Yeah.
okay, fine, I can do this,
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And so when you were talking about when you were a young mom and these downloads started coming to you and you pushed them away for a while, but what did they feel like to you? How did they come across and what did they feel like?
They would come at sometimes the weirdest time, maybe not the weirdest times. Like some of the biggest downloads I remember is like being at the park with my son, pushing
Mhm.
him on the swing, and I am getting full downloads of information about children and the wisdom that they bring us. And funny is, it would happen at the park a lot. And maybe
Right.
it's because I was surrounded by kids, not just my son, and I was feeling their
Hmm.
energy and feeling their not knowing. I was
Hmm.
hearing their angels being like,
Oh,
they're the
wow.
wisdom speakers, they listen to them. And I also, in retrospect, realized that when we're in that energy, when you're at the park or you're playing with your children,
Mm.
you're in the energy of joy and play, usually, depending on what you're playing, maybe it's torturing you, but you're usually in joy, and
Mhm.
joy and love are so similar that it's really easy for those high frequency downloads to just start coming through your
Beautiful.
system when you're
Mm.
in that mode and you're in a mode of connection. So I feel like, but I didn't know that was what was happening, but I would go and write in my journal like these things that I was receiving. And a lot of it was about children, a lot of it was about healing.
Mhm.
But at that time, I wasn't sure where it was coming from. I was like, oh, it's like source
Yeah.
or it's just wisdom. But I knew it wasn't me. I knew we're vessels for information, but I didn't have the words for it. And it would take me back sometimes. Or I would
Mhm.
tell my husband, I was like, I had this profound thought. And he was like, you need to share it. I was like, okay,
Yeah,
nope.
right. Well, I'm thinking two things that there's that discernment of what was coming through you felt like higher wisdom, like it felt different than just your thought processes and that number one. And number two, I'm thinking at the time you're a younger mom, a younger woman, and you've gotten out of, I'm not sure you've gotten out of your career as a lawyer by then, but you're looking around and are you seeing around you? I'm just going to call it like spiritual places to turn, or did in ways you feel like an outsider to what you were receiving and all the information and like your new passions?
I was very fortunate that I had a mentor named Cecily Miller. From the moment my husband and we met her before we got married, and she was part of our life since conscious conception. And so I had someone who was, she is extremely intuitive, psychic, while being a prenatal psychologist. So because we are a blended family and a modern family, we use
Mhm.
that because we are literally the show, our ages and everything. We we're like, we want a conscious marriage, and do this consciously. So we were working with her and to bring in, if we're going to bring in a new life with older children, we want to do this really thoughtfully.
Right.
So I was very fortunate that she was brought into my path.
Hmm.
So we'll say, not coincidentally,
Yeah.
either my angels, my son's angels, Cecily's angels were in communication and we were brought together. And
Hmm.
so I had someone always nurturing that higher perspective for me and reminding me of those pieces because she is extremely spiritual and connected. So I had that outlet. However, there were other things along the way that needed to come in to help me
Mm.
really figure it out, like Dr. Shafali's books when it came to conscious parenting and other, I should let everybody, I'm a book addict. So any spiritual book I could get my hands
Right.
on,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
read, but I didn't have an outlet with other mom. It was books and Cecily, and
Yeah.
then Susie was then the next, Susie Lula was then
Okay.
the person who also helped me keep nurturing that spiritual, deep soul aspect of with the 3D path that we
I
are
love
all
it.
trying to
Yes.
navigate.
Yes.
So I have been blessed with
Mhm.
amazing mentors. And I thank my angels for that because I know they were putting the people in front of me that were going to keep me diving in.
You sometimes can see that these things are part of our life's path. I was talking to someone recently about, oh, it was Dara Brewstein who was just on the podcast, and she became a mother not too long ago. And she studies consciousness all the time and has interviewed Deepak Chopra and has been in the principles. And it's so easy for me to say, oh, you had all these things when you had your baby. Like that must be such a blessing. And I think in so many ways it is. But I think that when we look at one another and see, because I look at you and I think, oh my gosh, you came upon these principles when you were younger and you could apply them to your life. And it's true, but we must understand also that we're all on our very own unique soul path. So if it is for us in this lifetime to uncover the magical realm of any of this, whatever you call magic or whatever someone else does, but the realm of angels and spirit guides and ascended masters, it's a whole different language. Not everybody is going to have it, but I think like honoring, I think an old version of me parts would be like, oh, and like I was saying when I interviewed Dara, oh, wow, they're so lucky they're discovering it young. But I think instead of taking that kind of, that's almost like based in comparison. And that's comparisons. Let's usher that out the door, and then now I can be in a place like, isn't that the most divine, beautiful thing that it's starting to enter people's lives younger and younger and it's there. And so I love that. And if we get into then you are developing your openness, what you're receiving, how you sacredly practice connecting and what's unfolded for you. And then what is your work beginning to look like now as you're really moving into it?
So I went looking. Actually, I want to back up because I want to honor what you just shared first
Hmm.
about people may hear, oh, she had someone right away
Hmm.
helping her connect with her baby and to be in a conscious or an awake, attempting to parent in an awakened state. I will say that I needed that. My background, I needed a lot of healing to enter motherhood. And my soul also chose a blended family. So I was called to different resources than other people who don't go
Mm-hmm.
straight into a blended family. So I want to honor that
Hmm.
I was in very much need of great support, and
Hmm.
not everybody needs that.
Hmm. Hmm.
A
Yeah.
great mother, everybody. And
Yeah.
I'll also honor your child chose you for a reason and for their learning too, because we're growing with them. And
Hmm.
if we were all awakened and perfect parents the minute they arrived, then we wouldn't be growing and learning
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And it's part of their soul plan, part of our soul plan. And that's how I see it, is like they chose us to be on this path together. And yeah, my son and my bonus children have had to navigate my challenges and my inept abilities in motherhood and parenting. And it has been for all of our growth
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
lessons, right? So it
Hmm.
was part of I believe it was part of all of our
I love that.
blueprints that
Yeah.
we agreed upon. And
Mm.
that's maybe my way of trying to help myself and
Yeah.
anybody who's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that or that I didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really hard to hold sometimes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like we all chose it, and look at how much you learned from
Absolutely.
being
Yep.
able to go back that way.
I'll say too, just as an aside for conscious parenting, is that you and I tend to call it that because maybe because we studied with Dr. Shafali, and it's being called a lot of different things. But in the end, it's really having a vision, I think, of deep connection with our families, creating newness, new experiences that maybe we didn't experience, and also looking at ourselves and knowing, like looking into with so much compassion, the places that are calling out for healing. And we said it before we started recording. when we're doing that work, the beauty of it is we're healing ancestral lineage, and that's going back and it's also going forward. So I love that. And the openness that comes with conscious parenting, because it also, I have found when I'm working on myself, I'm also working on my communication coming from my higher self in relationships. And I think my kids really benefit from it too. I don't really talk about them so much here, but it opens up a lot. And then if it's meant to be wherever it is right now at this point in time, but in the relationship where the things we're talking about today on the podcast, if they can, like angels or spirit guides or higher selves or whatever it is, the things that are a little more cast to the side in terms of our regular, everyday, mainstream conversations, I feel like there are avenues to offer it. And again, another resource, another tool. I maybe you and I were talking about that the other day, that not every tool is going to be for everyone. And so this is a beautiful one. But I really want to talk about angels because I often say on here, I grew up Catholic. And so angels were mentioned, but we had the kind of family where we were absolutely in church every single week. And so I likely, looking back, if I can be honest, often an angelic presence there. I can honor that. I don't, I ended up leaving Catholicism and don't practice a traditional religion now, but I feel like angels were talked about. But I was going to say we went every week, but we didn't talk about any of it at home. And yet I can remember before my mom passed away, her having these angels, this collection on her windowsill. And I think that she may have had a quiet obsession that she never talked about, or and maybe partly because it was the unseen mystery that she was tapping into, but we didn't speak about it in language and bring it out.
I too was raised Catholic and also don't identify as religious or in a religion, but highly spiritual. And yeah, angels, they don't, no religion gets to claim them. They're in all the religions mention angels. So they help everybody. And that's where you don't have to be one thing or a particular
Hmm. Hmm.
belief system, believe in angels or to trust that they're there.
Hmm.
And I think that was your mom's intuitive knowing that she was surrounded by angels because we all are. We all
Hmm.
guardian angels, helper angels. There's the archangels, and then there's ones overseeing the universe.
Okay.
So we all can connect. And I think
Hmm.
when we separate from thinking everything has to be logical, which is what pulls us a little bit away from our intuition, that everything is in the mind, which the intuition is not. When we lean more into the intuition, we have this sense that we are protected. There are light beings around us, and we may see them, we may feel
Hmm.
them. Everybody has maybe a different way that they receive
Yeah.
info or the whispers. I do think almost everyone hears the whispers.
Hmm.
We don't heed them or
Hmm. Hmm.
fully listen. So I'm imagining your mom was
Yeah.
having her experience with angels and was drawn to angel figurines or
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
angel pictures. She was sensing her connection to the angel. A lot of us were not raised with the way to communicate about our intuition or the feelings we're having or these communications that we don't quite understand because nobody else is talking about them.
Yeah, it's making me remember right now there was this gold, and if my any of my family is listening to this one, it was this gold threefold. It was like flat wood, but it was painted in gold. And it was either at my house, I might have been at my grandparents' house, but the doors would fold in and they had like an ornate pattern on them, but you would open them up and I'm almost positive there were angels in them. Really beautiful. So I want to ask you, so, in fact, we are surrounded by angels, our guides, presence. Why? Why are they surrounding us? What are they here to assist us in?
Oh, and I'm going to add to that last part. the other reason I think people don't talk about it much, and
Mm-hmm.
especially like it's now talked a lot more about, is that in religion, it also is more like, I think people are like, why would the angels be talking to me? I'm not Mother Mary
Mm-hmm.
getting a message from Gabriel, right? Why would I be getting messages from angels? That's why we don't talk about it. And that is a big piece of why I had trouble coming out and talking about
Mm-hmm.
is who am
Mm-hmm.
I to say that I'm channeling angel healing energy for people.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
do think there is that element to it as well, that we think it's not attainable
Mm-hmm.
for us because we
Yeah.
aren't Jesus, Buddha,
Yeah. Right.
or whoever
Mm-hmm.
your ascended master. So I wanted to say that, but your question is about what do the angels want us to know?
Yeah.
And they are all around us. In my experience, I'm going to speak from my experience and what I channel. They're here to support us and guide us. They have many roles, but I think their biggest message and purpose is to guide us, to protect us in times when we need protection, and to help us stay on our life's mission and
Mm-hmm.
path, and
Mm-hmm.
to fulfill our whatever you want to call it, your
Mm-hmm.
life's mission, your service, your path, and what you came. I
Yeah.
think in my experience, that's their biggest piece. But then there's, other angel, there's going to be angels that come in particularly for people passing
Mm-hmm.
over. So they're particularly there at births and
Yeah.
early death because it's a transition period. And if you've ever been with someone passing, there's a very different energy present. I think when people feel it, but don't know exactly what that is. And it is that extremely high frequency of angel beings surrounding the space and assisting everybody in there, and especially the soul
Wow.
transition.
That's so beautiful and comforting. And that's just a reason for this discussion being so valuable because we all go through those losses. And so I'm thinking too, Ariana, like, how do you think about it in terms of, when someone crosses over, do they often become like, who are the angels? How is that conceptually? How do we think of it? Because sometimes when we cross, you might become a spirit guide. Is that try to educate here? Because like even when I think of my own language for it, you can see it's not completely clear on who are the angels and how do we ascend after we pass on.
That is a really good question. I'll say what I have channeled and experienced, and other people may have slightly different
Okay.
opinions. Some angels have had human earthly life, and
Okay.
some haven't. And some have ascended through the process and become angels. Yeah, and some choose to be spirit guides. And in my understanding is that when we pass over and we review this life that we just had and the lessons, we have choices where we're going to be and what is our next step in when we join, for
Hmm.
those Star Wars lovers, the
Yeah.
Force, when we are now one with the Force, what our role will be in that phase before we come back.
Okay.
If we're
Hmm.
coming back, if that's part
Hmm.
of in my experience, some go to the angel realm, some choose to be spirit guides,
Hmm.
some are loved ones it's not ghost. They are not ghosts. They are just in that place where they're not necessarily guiding you. They're just loved ones that you can connect to, and
Hmm.
they're still in their process of
Okay.
choosing where they're going. They're
Hmm.
in their process. And that's what mediums connect to loved ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that loved ones do not become part of your angel team or
Hmm.
your guides, but they're a loved one who is in your guide team. My experience with one person is that I do think she quickly went to the angel realm and is part of many people's teams.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah.
And I do think that's also because she was an earth angel.
Okay. Hmm.
And so my sense is she already had that energy
Yeah.
in this lifetime and was on a mission
Hmm.
and connecting to the angel realm. She's in it. She was already in it here on earth.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
like, connected to it. So It does get wishy-washy, and I think it depends on everybody's soul
Yeah.
blu- blueprint and
Hmm.
what they're choosing for the next lifetimes or not.
Okay. Okay. And I love all of that. I was just thinking about how I think it's easy for me to get there right now in my life, but is it our ego, our mind that can get in the way of us believing the truth of this? I think the answer is yes. And for the layperson who doesn't feel they are, but doesn't feel that they're receiving messages and supported in this manner, how can they begin to lean in and listen? And I know that there's these instances then that an angel is thought to have appeared during a miracle of some sort. And I love hearing those stories. So that's another thing, maybe a direction we'll go. But how does just your kind of average person that's like that angel talk is fascinating? How might they begin to communicate with their angels and maybe look for ways that the angels are guiding or communicating with them?
And you're right, the ego and the mind is what interferes the most. Like I was saying before, there is that little voice is like me, like why would I be right? I
Right.
think a lot of people hear that, or is this really true? I think the biggest thing people say to themselves, I'm making this up in my mind.
Hmm.
And I say that from experience.
Yeah.
I was doing that. I was talking myself out of it for years, right? I was convincing myself it's something else. And I had to dive in into the intuitive arts, like really honing in on your intuitive gifts.
Hmm.
And everybody has them. And I'll just name drop my other mentor, Jessica Rachel. I had to keep seeking out people to help me
Hmm.
believe
Hmm.
this. I
Hmm.
was not making this up.
Yes. Yeah.
Jessica Rachel, my dear friend and mentor, has been like for the last few years, like poor thing constantly, you're not making this up. Like you can't make this up. So
Yes.
it does. I think the biggest thing is like learning to trust.
Mm.
And that is the hardest part when you first start to connect with your intuitive gifts.
Yeah.
And how I would describe intuition, just for anybody who's, because people say, oh, it's
Hmm.
intuition. It is psychic gifts that we all have. It could be things you hear, things you feel them, you know them. It's not in your head. It's not
Hmm.
that loud voice in your head. It is that really soft voice
Hmm.
asking you to listen. It's that knowing where this happens a lot. Like my son's a really good example. I'll say, "How did you know that?" He'll say something. I'll be like, "How did you know that?" I just know.
Hmm.
He has no logical explanation. And it's
Mm.
because he's using his into it.
Yeah.
It's claircognitive. He is very claircognizant. So he knows
Hmm.
this is true. And regularly that is the tough part with certain intuitive gifts is like, how do you trust something that your mind is
Hmm.
like, what? No, you need some science behind that. You need
Yeah.
some article telling you that's true. So we live in a world of information and that you have to have knowledge and science to prove everything. And intuition doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a knowing. So the first step is really connecting to your higher self and honing your intuitive gifts to be
Okay.
able to hear those messages from your spirit team and for angels. And I'd say the other piece is really focusing on your frequency. A big piece of quieting our mind, clearing our body, and being receptive to these very subtle messages is elevating our frequency and quieting our mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because spirit guides, angels, archangels, ascended masters, they're of really high frequency. So I do think you need to elevate, clear
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
to have a really clear communication. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it is challenge. Sometimes the communication isn't clear, and it can because our mind is getting involved
Mhm.
and mucking it up or doubt.
Yes. I just love this body of work and this conversation so much. And it reminds me too how you feel about I see this with myself as I've worked on the emotional blocks I've had and worked on my own healing through inner child work and through, like you said earlier, reparenting, coming to myself with such deep compassion that when we're doing the work, it's not like it doesn't show up anymore, but it does show up less and less. And then that I feel like with myself, I can say it allows me to sit in the quiet much, much more. And because I don't have the same hangups, I don't have the same stuck places, and I can get out of the mind more easily. And that's been a beautiful shift. And that comes to mind. Do you feel like it's the same thing too, as you've concurrently done that deeper healing human work that is necessary for, I would say, 99.9 of the percent of the population, but that's been your experience?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I do think the doing the inner work, that
Mhm.
inner child work, parts work, whichever way you approach your inner environment,
Yeah.
is what clears the way
Mm.
to
Mhm.
be able to trust the messages and to be getting clearer messages there,
Mhm.
because then it's filtering through less of a lens,
Yeah.
right? When we have a lot of unresolved matter inside,
Mhm.
things through different those lenses.
Yes. Yes.
And so you're right, doing the inner work does make you a lot more available for the spiritual work, and everyone can do it.
Yeah.
Everyone has all these abilities, but the inner work allows us to quiet our minds on easier
Mhm.
and sit in the quiet
Mhm.
to,
Yeah.
to hear these little things.
Yeah. And I think like what you were saying before about your child, like just knowing the truth is if we have the older parts of us that are judging ourselves, like kids don't have that as much. It's unfortunate that those voices do come in earlier, but those voices are not yet internalized. And the more conscious of a home we can bring our kids up in, the more space there is to, I think, them to feel self expressed, like all the things, but to trust themselves. And yeah, I'm just thinking about that part where when we're getting the self judgment out of the way and the full acceptance, then we begin to trust, like, oh, okay, I see what Ariana's talking about. I see, and leaning into people like yourself who can mentor you, who can be that sort of, it's like spiritual angelic cheerleader to say, no, I know you have this, and I know that this is possible to tap into. And that being said, what are your favorite ways to work with people?
I love that you said it that way, like as a cheerleader, because my favorite thing to do for people is that I feel like I'm shining their essence back to them.
Mm, mhm.
It's through channeling angelic energy into our session to show them their angelic essence,
Yeah.
their
Mhm,
pure essence
mhm,
that is beneath all these critical voices, the doubt,
mhm,
the trust issues. Those are all voices that were piled on top of your true
mhm.
loving essence that's in there and that you feel, but then we get
Yeah.
lost in it
Mhm,
because of
mhm.
conditioning. And I just love being that a light for
Yeah.
someone to be able to see themselves how I see them
Mhm, mhm.
and how their angels see them.
Yeah.
Your angel loves you unconditionally. You can do no wrong.
I love it.
They're with you no matter, there's no
Mhm,
wrong. There's
mhm,
just choices that we learn from.
mhm, mhm.
And so I love being able to be that person who helps others see
Yeah.
that piece of them and just taking off that one little piece a little bit more so you
Mhm.
feel that essence,
Yeah.
are that essence, and you can live in it a teeny bit more,
Ah,
like each day.
yeah.
Because look, I needed all these people I have mentioned who have
Mhm.
held space for
Yeah.
me
Mhm.
to reflect back to me, no, this isn't you.
Yes.
You're believing these things. And that voice is what blocks our connection to our angels, that self-doubt, that
Mhm.
self-criticism, because you immediately go to, wait, is this just me or that? Instead of just trusting soul essence inside of us,
Mhm.
to trust those other messages coming from our spirit team, our higher self.
Yeah.
It's a practice of trust and a lot of
Hmm.
surrender.
Hmm. Hmm.
Lots of surrender.
Lots of surrender. Yeah. And I think it comes to me a lot is practice and be creating sacred spaces. You were talking about having that spiritual toolkit before we started, and I love that. But it is building it into creating space for it every day and creating more space for it. And I just feel like it just becomes, it's an energy. It's an energy. And I want to ask you too, just for the listener, is when you talk about our higher selves, is that the soul part of us? Is that a part of us that's connected to different realms like angelic realms? How do you think of our higher self?
I see the higher self and the soul as they're interchange. People use them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the piece of you that is above this earthly experience. It's the highest version of you that has decided to choose a body. And so it's who you contact for your guide, who gives you guidance that is very to the point,
Mm-hmm.
and it's frank and honest and usually soothing because it's what you needed, your soul wanted to hear, but your mind has been telling you, or ego has been
Wow.
sending you this. But I, how I vision it is your higher self is in you, but it's this piece that is in the line taking
Mm-hmm.
you to your angels, which are part
Yeah.
of source,
Mm-hmm.
and you are part of source. So it's like the line up,
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
higher self connected to the angels who are connected to source. And
Yeah.
it's one direct line. And so going
Mm-hmm.
to your higher self takes you out of the earthly 3D vision
Yeah.
to see the higher perspective and to
Mm-hmm.
like get the clear guidance
Yeah.
without the mind
I love it.
coming.
I think the reason that I've seen that play out into my life and the reason I love it so much is when I hit a block in my human life, I can see myself, and I've got to think that's my higher self guiding me fairly quickly. And then I can ask the questions of, wait a minute, you're triggered here, but how is this for you? And take quiet time. And I was telling you the other day, like responding to something, but taking my time, taking spaciousness, giving that gift to myself of a day. Or instead of feeling an immediate response, take 6 hours, takes whatever it is to tap into that guidance. And I'm just getting such a good feeling of that we chose these human bodies to learn what we're here to learn on this go around. And things are painful. We see it. We see it in the news. We see what's happening out there in our own lives, all these different kind of levels of it, right? And can knowing, not only seeing ourselves, but knowing that we are held by this friendly universe, that we are held by loving angels. It's such a compassionate way to live. It's like built in, it's here for us, it's here to guide us in an easier kind of flow. Things are going to happen. But when they do, we can meet them with much more grace and again, compassion for ourselves and the journey.
Totally.
Mhm.
Some people would maybe say, oh, it's just a comforting thought that you've got angels around you and protective. And I do think one of their main roles and what angels want us to feel is comforted.
Mm, mhm,
You're not alone. You are
mhm,
surrounded. No matter what the experience is, there's someone with you, and it is an angel presence. And the more we open up to that, you see so many things. They are sending you messages
yeah,
all the time, and it's not made up. The
mhm, mhm,
synchronicities aren't, it's not random.
no,
This
yeah,
person was put
mhm,
in front of you that
yes,
Nani connected us. That was not random. That
right,
was
yes,
angels working a group
mm,
that we all joined Permission to Thrive with Susie. It was not random. Our angels were all in convergence, being like, they all need to be here at this time. And look at what happened from those of us who
mm,
joined that and the connections that were made
yeah,
and growth that we
mhm,
all had. And there's messages. The more I opened up and believed
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing and taking time, like you said, slowing down and taking
Yeah.
time for what messages and signals and signs were coming in,
Mm-hmm.
more my life flows, or I don't, I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not so much, there's less resistance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, okay, I think there's something here for me I need to sit with.
Yeah.
They're
Oh my
trying to
gosh.
tell me something.
Yeah.
And the signs come in people,
Yeah.
what people say to you. It's little whispers in your dream.
Mm-hmm.
Be a
Mm-hmm.
dream. Numbers, animals. I think angels use amazing ways to communicate with you. It's just us keeping our eyes
Yeah.
open
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to those messages.
I think you told me recently too that you love angel numbers.
Yeah.
And can you just say a little bit about angel numbers? I'm surprised that we haven't gotten to it yet, but how do they guide you?
And I think that is a big way angels use to communicate with people because we look at there's clocks everywhere.
Yeah.
And so numbers are in each license plates. There's just numbers everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
way for them to get your attention.
Yeah.
And there are particular meanings. Angel numbers in particular are the three digits 111, 222. However, I do think angels use, if you, if 77
Mm-hmm.
is like your number, they're going to get
Mm-hmm.
your attention.
Yeah.
Someone's wearing 77 so that you go pay attention or walk over there
It's
to talk to that person.
yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, when they refer to angel numbers, it is the three digits, the 111, the 222, 333. And there are designated meanings like protection. When you see 222, you're protected and surrounded. 111, something's on the horizon, like you're manifesting or things like that. I also think like those meanings are helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think if you keep seeing a number, that you go and you sit and you
Mm-hmm.
ask, wait, what does this number mean to me?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And two, what are they trying to tell me with this
Okay.
number? Because I do think everything is
Yeah.
personal
Mm-hmm.
between you and your spirit guide, your angels or spirit
Mm-hmm.
guides, but your
Mm-hmm.
angels, just like numbers are the same as if a tulip may have a spiritual meaning,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, the tulip is a calling card for somebody on my angel team because she was a relative that I never met. She
Okay.
passed before, and she's the angel I've spoken to since I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
I took tulips to her gravesite.
Wow. Yeah.
So I know she's trying to get my attention and tell me something when tulips stand out to me. But for
Okay.
someone else,
Yeah.
a tulip may mean something else.
Mm-hmm.
It has a particular meaning for me. So that's why it gets tricky when we all are like 111 means this, 333 means
Yeah.
this. It can get very personal
Mm-hmm.
what the message is. And that's also why your intuition and your connection to yourself is such a key part of your communication with angels,
Yeah.
higher realm, because
Mm-hmm.
the more your signals to
Mm-hmm.
what messages
Mm-hmm.
or the way they would want to communicate, the more you'll understand the messages, or they'll be
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful because one that's a funny one that shows up for me is 47. And the reason I say it's funny is because my grandfather, I think I wrote that the other day, he played football at Notre Dame and his number was 47. It was my dad's family, and he's got eight siblings. And he would write 47 on everything he owned from the rowboat, because we used to go to the lake cottage, to just his kids would be able to say it. But 47 was everywhere. And I started noticing, I don't know, in the last year that this 47 was showing up. And the other morning I went to a workout class because I was thinking, like, is it me or why does this keep showing up? And I was at a workout class and it was at the end of it. And she said, hold your plank for 47 seconds. I don't know why I chose that number, but I haven't yet sat with it to decode the why. And it's like something like that, is it then the question mark of whether that's my grandfather energy? Just because that was his number doesn't mean necessarily it's him, but it does seem significant because it's a strange number to me, like an odd number, but it's been more recent in my life too.
That and happening more and more.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hmm.
So what I would say is that, yeah, it's his calling card to you, and he's asking you to connect because he has some sort of message for you. And
It's, yeah. Then we can expect unlikely sources then.
yeah, and me, yeah, he's wanting you to pay attention. There's something.
Okay. Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, I just because I don't think that I would expect it through that male energy line. And he was very masculine. And so that's I think when I think of angels, it's so feminine, but that's cool that it could be like, oh wow, no, it can show up in different packages.
Yeah, and I do consider the signs like a calling card. They're like, please call on me. Please
Mhm.
talk to me and connect with me.
Okay.
So he
Good to
could,
know.
he's
Yeah.
saying 47 because he's, Maureen, please sit and ask. I have
Yeah.
something to tell you. And so he's asking you to sit
Okay.
and communicate with him. So it's like his calling card to you of,
Sure.
I've got something to tell you right
Okay.
now, and I need you to sit with me
Oh, I love it. I love it.
because
Yeah.
they won't
Hmm.
angels won't interfere. We have free will. So
Okay. Yeah.
we do need to ask. They're asking us to call on them and to
Okay.
connect with them. And they'll
Hmm.
do that to be like,
Yeah.
please talk to me and
That's
ask
great. Yeah.
me.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think about my mom, her name was Georgia, and when I live in the upper, not upper, but Midwest, and when I see Georgia license plates, it's not that common to see a Georgia
Oh,
license plate here, and I know that's something, but I don't know if I've gone and sat with it yet. So I love that, just knowing that I can do that, and it might open some new information up to me. Yeah.
and this just came to me that before you went to that class, were you sitting, you could have been sitting with questions with your business or something like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
which because you were like, it was interesting. It came with the masculine
Yeah.
energy.
Mm.
And some of our doing questions, right? Maybe he has
Yeah.
he was like, I have some answers for you.
Oh, wow, I love it.
Yeah, call me.
Yeah. Thank you for everything today, Ariana. Where can listeners find you? And would you, before we go there, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we sign off?
Well, no, this has just been, it's been such a pleasure to share this space with you. And I love to talk about angels
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
intuitive parenting and just our connections to ourselves. So this has been a gift to me to be able to share what I love
I
and
love it.
spend
Yeah.
my days doing. So I am just so grateful for this space and for you
Mhm.
and our
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and speaking on angels and just that what is allowing us to feel deeply connected to this life in this lifetime. I just,
Mhm.
that's how, what this work means to me. So thank you.
And
Yeah.
I thank you for having this podcast and putting your voice out there and
Mhm.
stepping through your fears and doubts to
Yeah.
make space for all of us to have to share. And it's
Just
such a gift. It's such a
right.
gift. You're
Oh,
shining bright and you're helping all these
yeah.
beautiful souls shine as well.
Yeah.
And it's
Thank you
so
for saying that.
sacred.
I was just thinking about us. If you checked in with you 20 years ago, me 20 years ago, we would have never ever known that this is where we would be right now. So that's where I say keep on bringing forward the work, keep on stepping into anything that you feel that you're here to shine a light on for the listeners, because anything's possible and it's needed. These are not just things that are just like, oh, there's these silly gifts or that, I think I was saying something about that, but, not at all. In fact, it's starting to just level the playing field where we're quieting the parts of us that need all that physical evidence and we're beginning to believe more and it is changing. And so, yeah, I love it. All right.
A beautiful
And
process.
it's a
So
beautiful process. And so we will put your Instagram, your website in the show notes, your email too. And your session sounds so lovely. And I think that you're doing great work. So thank you.
thank you. So are you. And
Okay. All right. Thanks to the
Join
listeners
that
once
group.
again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ariana. Thanks for the listeners, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.